Hi everyone. In this week's Employee Spotlight edition, I'm joined by Peter Ryan. Peter is the Managing Director of Aspira Europe and Global Sales Director since 2020. Thanks for joining me today, Peter.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here, Deirdre.
Peter, you led the launch of Aspira Europe in the Netherlands, based in both Amsterdam and The Hague 3 years ago, actually this month. How did your previous experience prepare you for that?
Well, I was truly humbled to have the opportunity to lead Aspira in Europe. And we've been working globally for many years, and this was the culmination of Aspira's achievements, you could say, at that time, and a culmination of my life and my career. I think I took all the good experiences and learnings I've had and some of the bad ones, and I tried not to repeat them. And I think that really helped me bring forward the best of myself and Aspira to the table. And to be clear, any success we've had over here, which has been a lot, is to the credit of many more than just me. I've been on the front line, but I stand on the shoulders of many others. And look, at the end of the day, that experience was centered mainly around project management. We went in with a strategy to be project management led in the Netherlands. We felt that was the right way to propose ourselves here.
So what does your typical day look like, Peter?
I think a lot of people say, am I a morning person or an evening person? Well, I'm not a morning person, you could say, and I know we're filming this in the morning, so I've had my coffees, and that's absolutely necessary before I can get my day started. I love to have a coffee, and myself, my wife have one together, and after we get the kids off to school, and then I go straight in and I work a fairly full-on day. It's busy. I've got a famously busy calendar, but my priorities are clear. They're people focused, they're client focused, and then but I make sure that I spend time with my family, which is great during COVID time, so we can do that around dinner time for sure. And I like to go for a jog in the evening to get exercise and just to keep circulating. So
So you've mentioned that you very much put clients at the forefront. What makes Aspira so unique?
I think in a word, empathy. We walk the talk. We care about the client's problems. We try to understand them fully, and we can deliver to those needs. We know the challenges they're feeling. We want to walk in their shoes, understand those challenges, and deliver services authentically behind that.
So you said you're a lifelong project manager. What project are you most proud of?
I guess one is my greatest success and one is my greatest failure, I suppose you could say. My greatest success, it was a project that I led out of Melbourne, Australia, just before I came to Aspira in Amsterdam. I was working in Melbourne. I deployed a very large SAP ERP CRM system to 36 different countries with one large education organization. That was a fantastic experience. We mixed waterfall and agile. We focused from an unprecedented perspective in my career on people change management. The biggest mistake, I think that's, as human beings, hopefully we can learn from our mistakes. And I did a similar session that you're doing with me here, Deirdre, with the PMI Belgium. They interviewed me about project mistakes, and so please don't go and watch that one. But no, that was good fun, because I was reflecting on a project I did in Northwestern Australia many years ago, where I was trying to deploy mobile handsets to train drivers to improve the business intelligence they used to drive trains and to deliver things on time. It was a whole supply chain project. And we were, the biggest mistake I made and we made as leadership in that program was to assume that the requirements that had been handed to us were based on direct feedback from the train drivers and those people who had been working on that and who do have to use the handsets at the end of the day, the users. It seems obvious now. But because they were so remote, they were in Northwestern Australia and I was in Perth, Western Australia, so it was like a flight away. They said, don't worry about going to talk to them. Just go ahead and deploy the system, assume the requirements are right. Luckily, just before we were about to get really down into the business of execution, I got the opportunity to fly to Northwestern Australia and meet some of the train drivers, and they took me into a warehouse and pointed at a whole box of mobile phone and handsets that they had used before or been offered before that they never used. And they said, we're never going to use them. Whatever you deploy, we're not going to use, my friend, because you don't understand. You haven't walked in our shoes. So that instigated us and our change management team to get on the trains, and we went up and down the trains in Northwestern Australia, these big iron ore trains, and watched how the train drivers behaved and what would suit them and what would not suit them in terms of how mobile phones and how handsets and iPads and so on and so forth, that type of technology could physically work in that harsh environment. So I learned a lot then, and I learned a lot about saying no project can be successful unless you really get to speak to the direct users, and don't allow people to give you excuses. No, you don't need to talk to them. It's too difficult. They're too distant. No, tell your clients the best way I can deliver successfully for you is to speak to the end users.
So a change management strategy then, Peter, is incredibly important when you're implementing a project like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Project management has evolved over decades, right? It was a profession that really came into its fore in a formal way 50, 70 years ago. And nowadays we begin to, and it's constantly growing and evolving, right? You can see it with Agile, but people change management, the psychology of change, when it was just one chapter in a book about project management, now it's an entire profession that projects use in the right way to deploy that change. There's no point in deploying the perfect project without understanding the people that you're deploying it to. You buy in, you get the experience they're going to have at the end of the day. And
just speaking to our clients, Peter, what kind of challenges do they bring to you to solve?
Yeah. I on one hand, you could say there's no challenge too big or too small. If it's important to the client, it's important to us. And I really mean that, right? And I sometimes have to remind a client there is no challenge too small. But let me talk about a big one. We're working with one of the biggest banks at the moment in the Netherlands. And because of our history of doing some fantastic work in the Central Bank of Ireland and in other banks in Ireland and throughout the world in the finance and banking space, we won an amazing opportunity, and we beat out some tier one organizations there because of our flexible but best practice models and offerings. I think I underlined flexibility and adaptability really in there. The challenge they threw at us was they wanted to reinvent themselves as a bank. They wanted to be far more customer focused. And they felt that they had drifted into being more of a traditional regulatory driven bank. They have to keep the regulatory side clean, of course, no question, but they wanted to transform much of their core services. And also from an environmental perspective, they are, and a lot of banks now get reports on where they're putting their funding for the projects that they support. So they had a big strategy set out. But how do you best implement any strategy? I firmly believe projects are the best vehicle to deliver a transformation. So they turned to us and a few other companies to propose how we would help them transform or take their transformational strategy into reality. So we now have, we won that opportunity late last year, and we're now in the process. We've completed phase one of that effort just recently, where we're setting up a transformation office, essentially a PMO, for want of a better word.
Okay.
But that PMO has full oversight of the entire portfolio that they're trying to implement. So we're not only helping them staff up a PMO to design how the processes work, but most importantly, what is the portfolio that will align to those strategic objectives, and how do you most efficiently and effectively deliver that with people, process, and technology?
Our customers are at the forefront. How does Aspira maintain the loyalty of those customers? And we have some excellent customers on board.
We are credible, we care, we are fair with our clients, and I think one of the things is to ensure that we are collaboratively generous.
So Peter, before we wrap up, what inspires you?
My three wonderful kids who challenge me with simple questions like why, which is a bit of a brain teaser at times, right through to some very complex questions, like my daughter challenging me to help her with her maths homework. So I now say that the course I learned was completely different, so I kind of avoid that now. But also,
so do I. I delegate that.
Exactly, delegate it. Your teachers should be doing that, right? And look, my incredible wife, she's my best friend. She's my inspiration from a professional perspective, and also from of course, a personal perspective. She helps me grow as a person and a professional too, right? You know, she's big into change management, communications, and so on and so forth. So it's always a very important thing in any organization. So hopefully she'll give me 4 to 5 stars for this interview.
Peter, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
It was my pleasure. Yeah, thank you so much, Deirdre. My best.